I think the fascination with HTML early on was being able to just like create something out of nothing, right? And then people start using it, and your site gets kind of some traffic and popular, and you need to look at things from the perspective of whoever you're building stuff for, right? And obviously if you're building something for everyone, then it's a lot trickier. But if you're building something for a specific group of people, you really need to focus on that group of people and their needs. Why wouldn't you want to try to figure out how to make something that every person on the planet or every type of person in a certain industry can use to make their life better?
And that's next on Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. So, the big question is this: how are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough, use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams? Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. If you like this video, do not forget to hit that like button now. Or if you want us to improve our content, go ahead and hit the thumbs down button and give us your feedback in the comment section below. Here at Tetranoodle, we are passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. Every week, we bring you insightful and engaging interviews, tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your business or rise in your corporate profession. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And do not forget to hit that bell icon so that you are notified when we publish new content. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. Today we will be talking with Kevin Horek. So Kevin is a published author, and he's best known for his work published on Zurb Foundation 5, which is a responsive web framework. He's also a radio, TV, and podcast host for the podcast called Building the Future. It was started to get over his fear of public speaking, and he continued to push himself out of his comfort zone by guest blogging for various websites. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. That's great. Great. Awesome. So now let's get to know you better. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your experience?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, still currently call that home. Basically, I kind of fell into the whole web thing pretty early on in the 90s. I was lucky, kind of all the males in my family, basically my dad, my uncle, the list goes on and on, kind of in the tech space. And so my dad used to bring home a little Mac every weekend, and I used to play with that. And when I was 12 in school, we were learning HTML and building little websites and stuff. And so it's kind of learning that in the evenings and weekends. I taught myself a bunch of stuff, building kind of band fan sites, you should say. And then my dad came to me one day and he said, the local tech college basically has a course on all the stuff you're playing with in the evenings and weekends. We should go to the info night. And so we went. I left high school a month early to go there, and ended up working at the university, then going back to university, got hired by one of my teachers at his software company. And then just over the years, I've kind of worked at marketing companies, software companies, other agencies, startups, wrote a tech book, like you mentioned, along the way. And a couple of years ago, I started a radio and TV show, largely to get over my fear of public speaking. So that's kind of a quick overview. I don't know if you want to dive in on any of that, but
yeah, we will for sure. So it seems like you've had a very adventurous life. You got into something that you love doing, which is programming, working with computers. So tell us those early days. How were you just drawn on your own to the Mac PC that you got to play with over the weekends, or was there any other impetus for that?
I think for me originally, people, this really kind of dates me, but like there was a black and white version of Stratego on that Mac. I don't know if people probably remember it, but I used to play that a ton. I remember that. And then we eventually ended up getting a 386 after that at home, and just kind of monkeying with that. And then I think the fascination with HTML early on was being able to just like create something out of nothing, right? And then people start using it, and your site gets kind of some traffic and popular, and you start talking to other people, and the whole thing is just kind of interesting, right? So I don't know.
That's awesome. That's great. So it seems like, how can I put it? You are a lucky guy. Is that correct statement? Do you consider yourself a lucky guy for being sort of, getting familiar with these things that you like to do in your life?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think most people struggle trying to figure out what they want to do career-wise. And so, yeah, to figure it out or kind of fall into it, I think, as I like to put it best, super lucky, right? But I also think too that I kind of created my own luck a little bit. Like I've asked for a lot of the stuff that's happened to me. I've, kind of hustled it, right? And I've kept at it. I've stayed current. I usually spend early parts of the year trying to learn new things. Not that I wouldn't try to learn new things throughout the year, but I really try to like focus heavily on a few new skills that will last me maybe the whole year. So I'm definitely lucky, but I'm, kind of constantly at it, kind of hustling and learning and still trying to push myself out of my own comfort zone.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, luck favors those who help themselves, or something to that effect. So what will you say to people, who are frustrated and who are struggling right now, and they just sort of blame it on luck and say, I guess I'm not lucky, I'll give up? What do you have to say to them?
I think the biggest thing, and it sounds really dumb and I say it all the time, is just start. Whatever that means, as simple as it is. It's like, if you are uncomfortable with something or you want to do something, maybe like the first step that's small is just, if you're looking to say maybe launch a new business, for example, it's like put up a landing page. You don't even have to have a logo on it. Just pick a name, put up like a 1-page website, maybe with just the company name, a logo if you have one, and your phone number and your email, right? Just start, and then start promoting that on social media, and just say, and tell your friends and family about it. And then next day is like, okay, well, if you don't have a logo, get a logo created. Then once you have a logo created, get like business cards created, and then maybe go to a networking event. Or like, you don't have to just quit your job and dive right in. You can do these small incremental things that slowly build up to something. I wish I would have done that a lot sooner. Like, I'm 36, just so you have some context, but I wish I didn't figure that out in my early 30s. I wish I figured that out in my early 20s, to be honest with you.
Well, there's always a good time for everything, but I completely agree with you. Just getting started is the key. Taking action is the key. And as you put it, it's simple. You don't have to shoot for perfection. At least get started and bootstrap your way to success. That's what we are all about here. All right. So now tell us this interesting story about you learning HTML first and launching a website, a fan website for your favorite music band, I guess, or?
Yeah, it was interesting because it was for Nirvana back in the kind of 90s. And basically a lot of it was just trying to connect with other people online, just trying to get different live recordings. It was like back in the day, it sounds so bad. Like, you could basically go on YouTube and get any live recording of a band, but back then it was hard, right? And you either had to send away for it in the mail, or you had to, I remember sending different files through ICQ back in the day, like whole albums, right? Just to get it. And so for me, it was kind of, I love music. I, grew up kind of playing drums and guitar, and I still play a little bit here and there. But for me, it was just being able to just create something and then connect with people. And actually it was wild. Hit Parader, the magazine, I don't even know if they're still around, to be honest with you, like wrote about the site I was building and a handful of others at the time. And so just kind of getting some recognition for something that you were building, right, was really fascinating to me. And then having people all over the world just visit it and connect with you was really quite cool for me anyway.
That's awesome. So you combine your two passions, like music and HTML and programming. Like, did you do you think that your passion for music had something to do with your success and sort of how you stuck with programming and continue to build traction for your website?
For sure. I think it's interesting how many people either are a musician, become a musician, still a musician in kind of the web space. I also, and it might sound dumb, but I've also kind of tried to do a lot of the like do it myself kind of stuff. Even with the show, it's just really me, and just kind of hustling that, right? And so for me, it was listening to some of those guys that used to just get in a van with their buddies and tour the country. I kind of see it almost the same way. It's like, well, you kind of just, for me, it was just learn by kind of trial and error. And I see it the same as like getting in a van and just playing night after night until you kind of make it or you give up, right? And I think that's kind of how I sum up my whole career. I've spent a ton of time just playing with things, learning by trial and error, and not really afraid to fail, right? Which failures always comes across so negative in online and whatnot. And I can't even remember how many times I failed in the last month. Like, it doesn't even matter anymore. It's just, it happens so frequently. And what I mean by that is, like, it could be, you send a bunch of emails to people about whatever, and you hear back from none of them. Or, like, to me, is that a failure? Sure, I call that a failure, but I don't see that's bad. You just keep going, you try something, you try a different angle, just kind of keep at it. Like, anybody that's ever achieved what they wanted to achieve in anything just decided to go for it and trial and error their way to it. At least that's been my experience with the people I've talked to.
No, I completely agree. Like, there's a famous story about Edison when he was trying to invent the light bulb. And I think it took him like 10,000 attempts. And basically he said, now he knows how not to build a light bulb, in 10,000 ways. So to your point, failure is the way to success, because only then you can learn and improve yourself. Otherwise, if you get continuously 100% success, you are either a genius or you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Sure. Well, and I also think too is, in like that email example I gave, nobody knows that I sent 100 emails and nobody replied to me, for example. Like, unless you tell people, nobody really knows, right? Like, I don't know why we don't do stuff because of this like unknown failure that may happen or may not happen, but nobody even knows about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But even if people know about it, the thing is, I think people don't talk a lot about their failures, and I think that should change, because it builds this image of successful people as if they are successful all the time. But whenever I talk to successful people, they have the same story, that they have more failures than successes. Only thing is, we learn and hear about successes, practically all the time, and never about the failures.
Totally. No, and I think the thing is, the sooner you learn that, the better off you will be. And I think it sounds really stupid, and I keep telling people about it just because I think it's a really good kind of brutal example of it. Is I read Gene Simmons's Me Inc. book. Forget about his like even views on society or relationships or any of that. And he just wrote a book about business. And I'm thinking, Gene Simmons, everybody knows him. He was in Kiss. Obviously, they've merchandised more things than need to be merchandised. And he's worth like $300 million or more, right? So I thought, okay, I want to read this book, right? And because he brutally honestly talks about his successes and his failures. And, if somebody's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, been in this huge rock and roll band, and he's brutally honest about business, and he talks about, well, he launched a magazine that failed. And so like when a guy like that has a huge amount of wealth, is super famous, and whether you like them or not, I'm not even really a big Kiss fan, to be 100% honest with you, but like just the business side of it, it's like, look at somebody like that still fails and openly talks about that. So like, of course I'm going to fail, right? Because I'm don't have that kind of money and I don't have that kind of popularity. So if somebody like that fails, well, everybody else is going to fail, right? That's how I kind of saw it. That was the first kind of eye-opening thing for me anyway.
Yeah, exactly. No, if you read biographies of all these famous people, if they're being honest, there you can find tons of examples of
Yeah, or like the Shoe Dog, the Nike guy, his name escapes me. Like that book, Shoe Dog, like unbelievable. Same kind of thing, right? Like Nike almost went broke 1,000,000 times, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all right, great. So we talked a lot about luck and how you can alter your luck in your favor by, taking action, massive action, and not being afraid of failure. Now, let's go to your university days. And I know that, you attended UCLA, and it actually had a tremendous amount of effect on you and your career. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the thing that was interesting about that experience was there was a handful of people that were not born in kind of America, myself included, and they either lived down there or were down there for the summer or whatever. And basically it was a corporate design class, and we had an assignment every week, and we were in a lecture hall. So like there was no computers. I don't even think there was a computer for the teacher. Like it was just a lecture hall, and you'd have to print off your designs and you'd have to put it on the board, and everybody had like 10 minutes to look at everybody's designs, whatever the topic was. Sometimes it was like web stuff, sometimes it was print stuff, sometimes it was logo work, sometimes it was kind of all of the above. And we went around the room and everybody had to say like what they liked and didn't like and why, which I think is the most important part, is like why. And like a lot of stuff, like I can give you a couple really good, simple examples that I kind of sum up the class. Is like, think of something as simple as the colors red, white, and blue. I think in North America, most people are like, oh, that's America. But if you go to other parts of the world, parts of Europe, they'd be like, oh, that's France, right? So something as simple as like that. Or another good example is you have people in a boat going down a canal. Some people would say, oh, they're on holiday. Other people say those are refugees. And you're like, it's quite different, right? And so having the perspectives from people with different heritages and backgrounds and from different parts of the world really opened my eyes to understanding. It's like, well, it sounds bad as like a white male. Sometimes you build for like a white male, right? And it's like, well, if I'm doing something for nurses and I'm not a nurse, well, then maybe I shouldn't even really like the design, or maybe I shouldn't even really understand the design. But if nurses like it and they understand it and it's usable for them, that to me is like a really successful project, even though I might not like it, because, well, if I'm not the target market, then, in some cases, maybe I shouldn't like it. And I think people forget about that sometimes. It's like, you can't please everyone, and you need to look at things from the perspective of whoever you're building stuff for, right? And obviously, if you're building something for everyone, then it's a lot trickier. But if you're building something for a specific group of people, you really need to focus on that group of people and their needs and what their understanding is, right? And sometimes even their technical ability, right?
Yeah. No, you touched upon a very important point, I think, which is empathy, right? Like, be empathetic to your users, your customers, your clients, and just understanding different cultures and, forcing yourself to immerse yourself in different cultures, trying their cuisines, maybe even learning a few languages and visiting and traveling opens up your mindset, and you can empathize with more people and be more successful, especially if you're, in the business of providing some service or building a product for your clients. So that's a very good point.
The thing that I find interesting about the whole thing is nowadays, your entire customer base is basically global. Unless you're building something specific for specific niche in a specific geographical region, why wouldn't you want to try to figure out how to make something that every person on the planet or every type of person in a certain industry can use to make their life better? Like that just seems, but so many people seem to think too small. And like the best example is like, you talk to some people and they're like, well, I'm going to sell coffee to downtown Vancouver and I'm going to make $1 billion. It's like, it's not even like possible, but it's like, no, you want to sell coffee to everyone on the planet or every downtown on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the way people need to think about these things. And like, I don't understand why you wouldn't try to understand where other people are coming from or their background or what appeals to them or what colors they need or what colors mean certain things to them, because you know, red in some countries means a lot different than in other countries, right? Or the colors red, white, and blue. So just getting people to think about inclusion and what other people are doing and thinking and how they're going to interact with what you're building.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very well said. Now let's move on to some tactical stuff. So, you know, I know you are a master networker, and you've also said that LinkedIn has gotten you 95% of what you have gotten in your career. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm the guy that randomly adds people. I've had people just laugh in my face about it. It doesn't bug me at all. I started it a number of years ago. The thing that I didn't realize when I really started, I thought my thought was, okay, well, I'm born and raised in Edmonton. It's about 1 million, give or take a little bit more if you include the surrounding areas. So not really like a huge place, but not really small either. And I thought, well, if I can connect with anyone at Google or Facebook or Apple, like online, why wouldn't I try? So I just started adding these people, and a lot add you back, some don't add you back. Eventually, though, what I really found is you get connected with some of these people and you actually have real relationships with them. I'm actually going to a conference next week and in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I met Bob, the founder, on LinkedIn, and we just got chatting. And it was right before I launched the show. And I said, hey, I'm doing the show. Do you want to be a guest? And he was like, sure. Do you want to come down and do some interviews at my conference in a few months? And it just kind of snowballs, right? It's like never bad to, I think you and I even met on LinkedIn, to be 100% honest with you.
That's right. That's right.
And so for me, it was just, when you put yourself out there and you start knowing people, things just start kind of coming to you eventually. It can take years, it could take months, it depends. But for me anyway, like I had all over my LinkedIn profile that I knew that web responsive frameworks that you mentioned earlier. And a publishing company out of the UK was actually looking for somebody to write a book on that framework. They actually reached out to the company that wrote the book. They were like, well, we don't have time to do that, blah, blah, blah. So they found me on LinkedIn, and I basically got a book deal just because I had on my LinkedIn profile that I used their framework for a number of versions on a bunch of projects and at a startup I worked at. So, you know, and I'd migrated versions. So I knew it pretty well, right? And I knew actually some of the developers and the project manager on the framework. So you basically just this automatic community around something just from being on LinkedIn and talking about it openly, putting your skills on there, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So it almost sounds like, you know, you have multiple passions. You know, obviously you are passionate about your work in programming and building websites and design, and you're adding a new talent, which is very important in my opinion, which is marketing. So can you tell us how that transition is going? How you're liking this transition, and what is so important about marketing?
Well, I think I'm actually pretty terrible at it, to be 100% honest with you.
Being humble,
it kind of makes me uncomfortable. But again, I think that's kind of the joy in it. I get like maybe some weird enjoyment out of things that make me uncomfortable. And so just, it's kind of like this challenge that you awkwardly kind of struggle through, right? And then, but if nobody knows about your product or service or what you're trying to do, you know, chances are it's going to go nowhere, right? And so you kind of have to market it yourself and what you're doing and try to make yourself some sort of subject matter expert in certain things. And so for me, I just want my content on as many channels as possible. And so I don't really necessarily have a favorite one. It's just, for example, with the show, it's like, well, some people are like, why would you want to air on traditional kind of FM and AM stations? It's like, because that's where people consume content. Yeah. So if those go away tomorrow, then I'll move to the new thing. And if something new comes, well, I'll move to that too. Like I just never understood why people have this like tunnel vision of like, we need to stay in this lane and only do this one thing. It's like, no, you should try to post and be on as many things as possible. And maybe that's like a selfish thing, but I just, if I'm going to do something, I want the most amount of people to see it, because let's be honest, doing a show, it takes you a lot of time and effort, right? And
for sure.
So why wouldn't you want the most amount of people to see it is kind of my thought behind the whole thing.
For sure. No, but that's the whole thing about, learning a skill, because marketing, as we know, is to, at the end of the day, it's to get more visibility and create more exposure for your name and company. But there are a lot of details in getting that done properly. So I think people do suffer from a limited scope, because they have only so much time in the day and they want to focus on certain things. But to your point, there's so much opportunity available today that even with a little bit of extra effort, I think you can get much more exposure. You can use automation in your processes and things of that nature to scale up your operation very easily, right?
Totally. And I think I try to automate as much as possible. Like I have a calendar booking tool for interviews. I try to schedule all my social media posts days out, or at least kind of morning of. Over time, you trial and error certain things. Like I trial and error a bunch of stuff that I don't post anymore to certain things because it just doesn't really convert, right? Or I also I know that my posting times to social media are best between like Tuesday and Thursday. Or like Saturday night at like 8:30. So eventually you figure it out, but then you probably have another guest or yourself. You'll be like, well, Tuesday to Thursday doesn't work for me, and Saturday morning's my best time. Like it really depends on your audience, and a lot of it's trial and error. And and it's always changing, right? So you kind of just need to keep at it and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And if a tool works, keep using it. If a channel works, keep using it. If a tool or channel doesn't work, stop using it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So, both of us are technical, and so, things, automation comes a little bit easier to us, but even if people are non-technical, they can always go hire VAs, virtual assistants, who can help take off a lot of these mundane things off your plate, and you can expand your time availability and resources that way. Now, let's talk about your podcast, Building the Future. So what is it about?
So I basically interview founders, CEOs, investors, advisors, anybody that's kind of doing something interesting or chasing their passion. I've kind of expanded it a little bit. I've had people like that are writing kind of business books or self-help books or motivational books. I've had some kind of musicians on the show. I've had some actors and actresses and that kind of thing. I just think that so many of the people that are brutally willing to talk about the highs and lows of chasing your dreams and your passions, because I think there's so many similarities. Sure, like your path's going to be different than my path, and it should be, because we're not the same person. We don't have the same background. We don't live in the same geographic location. So you can't follow somebody else's path. But if you can if somebody lists 30 things and you can try one or two of those things, and maybe one of those works for you, or maybe none of them, but you like keep trying things that work for you, that you hear that work for other people, maybe that'll inspire somebody to finally just go for it one day. Right? Like, I think that's the big thing. And it's also a really good networking tool for me, right? Like, it's kind of a LinkedIn 2.0. It's nice to be able to send an email to the investor and say, hey, you should really check these guys out, because you guys invest in this space, and they could be they're doing something really cool, right? Like, it's very cool in that sense. So for me, it's nice to have these open conversations so I can learn and hopefully promote things that I think are really cool and that the innovation that others are doing. And then hopefully, kind of connect them or connect myself to others as well.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating, just talking to people and sort of going through their experience. And as you said, you can always pick up a few nuggets here and there. And I think that itself has been such a transformational thing to pick up those nuggets from people who have accomplished much more than I have. So definitely I resonate with that comment there.
But I also think, though, that you shouldn't change your whole life just because you read somebody's top 10 lists that they do every morning. Like the best example is I am not a morning person. I will never be a morning person. So if I read somebody that's like, you should wake up at 5:30 every morning and then work out and then do this and do this, it's like, that will never be me. Like I try to find stuff. It's like, I'm a night person. So sometimes I can be tired all day. 9 o'clock rolls around, I'm wide awake. I rather work from like 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m. than try to wake up early and just like readjust. So like, I don't think you got to figure out what works for you and keep trying things to like improve upon that. But don't try to like 180 everything just because you read that something works for somebody else. That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. And then, one thing I notice is when people become famous, every sentence they say becomes a quote and, something that you should follow. So a very good example was Elizabeth Holmes. She started a company for blood tests and, she failed. Basically, she was sort of cheating her way to get a lot of investment. So her company was worth about $9 billion. But, when she was at the height of her career, every line she said was taken as sort of, words of wisdom that you should implement in your life. And when she was exposed and people, knew that she was not doing the right thing, now, people who were following her advice, they become, they look like fools. So don't take everything on face value, just evaluate everything and try to adapt it to your personality, your life, and do your due diligence before, you start following people blindly, right?
Totally. Yep. 100% agree.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for such an interesting conversation. I'm sure everyone in the audience got a lot of value out of it. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us a little bit about your company? How can people reach out and what kind of services you provide?
Sure. So if they want to check out the radio show and TV show, you can go to buildingthefutureshow.com. If you want to check me out on Twitter, it's just Kevin Horek, KevinHorek. And that's basically where you could find me. And if you just search my first and last name, I'm kind of on all over the place. So connect with me wherever and feel free to reach out to me. If you add me on LinkedIn, there's a phone number and email right in the heading, so you can just connect with me there. But I do really appreciate you having me on the show, and hopefully this was really good for people out there.
Definitely, for sure. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
And that's all for now. Until next time. And if you're an existing or an aspiring tech entrepreneur, then I invite you to check out my new online workshop, Bootstrapping Your Tech Startup Dreams. Go to bootstraptechstartup.com and sign up for free. I want to make sure that more successful and sound decisions are made every day in your tech projects. Let's start finding solutions to your problems. So go to bootstraptechstartup.com and I look forward to helping you with your tech projects. If you want more engaging videos and insightful interviews with industry's thought leaders, then check out other videos we have picked for you. The link is right there. And if you want to be notified about our new content, please do consider subscribing to our channel.